Hi everyone, thank you for joining me on session number 2 of the Coaching Upgrade series. If you're new here, hi, I'm Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive consultant and coach. I help people just like you maximize your potential and create teams worth leading because life is too short to lead mediocre teams, right? If you didn't take part in the first part of the series and you'd like to get it, you have my email. You get some reminders from my email address and everything. Just let me know and I'll be happy to send you a link to the recording of the previous session that you missed. That was in general about the impact coaching framework, which you got the short ebook about when you signed up. But today we're going to be focusing specifically around the tougher subject of how do we coach managers? How do we help our managers be managers, especially if they're first-time managers, if you're managing managers for the first time. I think you'll find the next 30-40 minutes useful. Of course, you cannot learn everything you need in that short of a time frame, but I think it will give you enough action items to actually start doing things. And as always, at the end of this, I will share an offering with a special discount for those of you attending here or getting the recording, so you can have assistance from me implementing impact coaching in your organization. And you can always send an email to me. I'm just so happy to hear already about people who started implementing by the book and seeing the impact it has made in their teams. So I'm here, always happy to hear about success and also about issues. So with that out of the way, let's start with our topic du jour: elevating your managers. How do we help them? So to frame things a bit, in the previous session, we covered the general importance of coaching. I'm going to assume you understand that if you signed up for this session, if you're sitting down to watch me talk about this. So I'm not going to sell coaching. However, I wanted to express how this is like with managers, something that we often miss when I talk to my clients about importance of coaching. It's very easy for many to think about how do I coach ICs, engineers, because it's tangible. Someone's not delivering. I can tell them what to do. I can pinpoint the bugs. I can pinpoint the issues. However, when it comes to more senior people who need more soft skills, or managers, soft skills make things a lot easier because the softness of the skills means that we have these gradients. It's not black and white. You cannot easily say he did that wrong or not most times. Sometimes you can. But a lot of the times we have issues that we cannot really say exactly what was the right way of doing things. And we cannot tell people easily that they have issues with how they engage people in a conversation when no one likes to hear the fact that they are the ones who, during every daily or every update, people automatically zoom out because they're just thrown out. They're not interesting. They don't know how to engage the people, that sort of stuff. When we get to that sort of feedback, it's always harder. And I will say that this means precisely that these are the areas where it's actually the most important to provide that feedback, to work harder. Even if for you personally, that's not the easy thing to do, it's probably the right thing to do. Now, I have this concept in my mind. Amazing people in organizations, they are force multipliers, right? They have the ability to make people around them be so much better. It's not about them being ultra productive. It's about these people who can spot how to make others even more productive. These people are worth their weight in gold in companies. Ideally, essentially anyone in your management team, anyone who's got some sort of leadership responsibility, ought to be a force multiplier. And what we'll cover today is how to make that happen. Yet, I'm betting that if you're here and you think about your team, there are probably at least 1 or 2 people who are in leadership positions and yet are not force multipliers. They might be even the opposite. They might be hindrances to some teams, to some projects. If that's the case, we have to treat that as our one of our highest priorities. I'm not going to say it's your top priority, but it's probably one of the highest ones, because when we have people who have this circle of impact that's greater because they have leadership positions, because they work across the organization being leaders, etc., when they are not optimal, when they are underperforming, when they have issues that affect other projects, those have greater impact, a bad impact in this case. Because every time someone can be a force multiplier and have positive impact reverberate around them, they just as easily, and sometimes even more easily, can have the exact negative impact that affects others. And when that's the case, everyone suffers, and especially the people reporting to that manager. Therefore, I think that if you had to choose, if you didn't have enough time, and I'm going to say you do have enough time, maybe at the beginning it's going to be harder, but even if you didn't have enough time, managing your managers, coaching them is, I think, more important and has a bigger bang for the buck. For every minute you spend on that, you will have more impact on your organization as a whole most of the time. So that should be your default. And I have two real stories about how coaching really mattered or was really needed yet not present. One is in a unicorn that I helped, where when I started working with the VP of engineering, I discovered that there was a director that has been underperforming for over a year, never got the proper feedback, was someone that everyone really liked, was technically very good, and even the management itself, this is not someone who was new to being a manager, someone who has had similar roles before, yet there was a misalignment between what that person was focusing on and what was important and what was the type of culture the company wanted to create. But that poor director simply never got that feedback till you know when, till the VP of engineering I started working with told me it's now too late. I'm being told by everyone around, from other VPs, from other peers, that that person has got to go. No one wants to continue trying to work with them. So unfortunately, that director was blindsided. He had to move aside. And I personally believe that could have been avoided, because I'm seeing that person now a couple of years later, who is managing other groups in different companies and doing that well. Therefore, there was nothing specifically bad about the person, but the lack of coaching, the lack of feedback got to the point where the entire group suffered for a year, and that person was blindsided because the VP of engineering dropped the ball. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. Contrast that with another scenario where a team had a team leader that was underperforming. After, I think, 6 years into the role, they realized that things weren't looking well. The director just decided to grab that person with both hands and really help him level up. She worked with him closely. She gave him the feedback that he really needed. She told him exactly what she wanted to see when it came to the improvement. And fast forward, I think within 6 weeks or so, they realized that they didn't need to continue with the PIP, the performance improvement plan. That person was performing much better than they ever had hoped. And now, a few more months have passed, and they're very, very happy and pleased with that team lead's performance. That's the magic of coaching. It can save someone's role, career. It can really help the team and everyone collaborating with them. After all, I'm guessing if you're listening, you're not working at Oracle, you're not working at IBM. I've written code for both. And therefore, you actually have collaboration flowing between teams, between departments. And when that's the case, a single bad manager can really affect half the company. We don't want to be there, right? So let's start getting into the actual ways of tackling this. I'm just going to check the chat for a second to see if there are any questions. Am I making sense? Anyone wants me to cover something I'm missing? Okay. Looks like we're fine, right? Okay, thank you guys. So let's get into manager development. How do you do that? How do you make your people improve? Now, actually, I will start by saying that this should be a major part of your responsibility of your day-to-day, because yeah, you have different projects and you have your regular meetings, but at the end of the day, you, as a tech executive, as a senior director, VP of engineering, whatever title you've got, you have the responsibility of creating this team, this organization that you're going to be proud of, that does what the company needs it to do. Therefore, when you look at yourself, I want you to consider, are you even spending enough time on this? How often have you taken time to coach your people, to give them feedback? What chunk does that make of your calendar? And if you're already overwhelmed with meetings up here, then we have an issue, because if you're that busy and you're not doing the coaching part, when is that going to happen? So first of all, not rule number one, rule number 0 of coaching your managers is that you have to realize how important this is and make time for it. You have to prioritize it, or it's not going to happen spontaneously, or not nearly as well as it ought to, because especially with things that aren't easy, it's so comfortable for us to ignore them as long as possible, which is how so many people reach the point of no return. We ignore it and ignore it till we have to lay that person off or do something as drastic, like the story about the director I shared earlier. So start by making time for that. I want you to consider how much time you're spending on that. I would say that for most of you, 10%-ish of your calendar should be those one-on-one meetings with your direct reports, at least. Okay, if you have any objections to that, write to me in the chat and I'll try to address that as we go along. Now, management is a profession. This is something that is a surprise for so many of us, because we learned how to be engineers or whatever profession you grew up in. We spent years, maybe we got a degree, we read a ton of books, we kept learning new frameworks. I remember, I feel like over the course of 2 years, I changed how I did front end 5 times, because we started with stuff like Google Web Toolkit, and then Backbone, and then AngularJS, and then React, and everything within a time frame of a couple of years or so. We have to keep learning. We have to invest in ourselves as engineers, right? Now, what do you do when you become a manager? For most people, this is just a matter of someone changing their title in, the org chart software that you've got, and voila, you're now a manager. What support are you getting? How do you even know what to do? Most of us, we just try to copy and paste what we saw our managers do. If they were good managers, maybe that will be okay-ish. If they weren't that good, we're gonna be even worse, because this is like photocopying. Every copy is actually worse than the previous one. So we don't want to do that. Instead, when I'm talking about treating management as a profession, we have to learn how to treat this properly. So first of all, define what's a manager in your organization. Like, for example, here, when I'm looking at my notes, things that I think you'll be better off if you schedule right now 15 minutes, you don't need more, in your day tomorrow, right now, if you want to start. I want you to think, what are the skills needed for a manager in my organization? What's the material I expect them to learn over time? Because again, this is not the Matrix. No one gets plugged in like Neo in the back of their necks and all of a sudden they know how to be managers. What do I expect them to learn and how? Like, do I want them to grab a copy of Aviv's book over there? Do I want them to do some training, join some communities, go to meetups, go to conferences. What do I expect people to do in order to become full-blown managers? Because the day they start, they might have the title, but they most of the times don't yet possess all the skills. This is something that they will have to hone over time. So I have to think about how do I want them to get there. I have to start planning for that. Before we can even do the proper coaching, coaching is about helping people see, you're here, we want to get you there, let's talk about that. The issue is, if you don't know what's there, if I don't know how a manager ought to operate in my company, if I cannot have this proper expectation setting about the skills they need, about how their time allocation would probably look like, about how I'm going to measure them for success or not, then coaching is going to be a lot harder, because you're trying to improve things within all of this ambiguity. So start by making things clear for yourself. And if you have issues with that, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to drop in a diagnostic call with you, 20 minutes, and we'll have something so you can start. But the main point here is that you have to start with knowing what's a manager in my organization so I can start coaching them. That's how we start, by treating management generally as a profession. Many of you probably have written job descriptions for engineers, and you have the different ones for full stack, front end, back end, AI, data. You have all the differences there. But when it came to a manager, maybe you had one template that you didn't think about enough. Maybe you even just promoted people internally, so you never even had to think about that, right? That's an issue. You have to treat management as a proper, full-blown profession. All right? And once you do all of that, I want you to think about, how do you align them with this new need? So I know what they need to do. How do I start getting them there? Part of this is coaching, helping them with specific skills, helping them learn how to learn, helping them learn how to verbalize the issues that they're having so that maybe you can help them. But you have to start putting that into place. How do you align them with the path they still have to take? Right? And next, make time for growth. As I said earlier about yourself, you need to make time to coach your people, because otherwise that's not going to happen. But you also want to ensure that the managers in your organization are not continuously overwhelmed. If all of them are working so hard, running from one meeting to the next, when are they supposed to have this deliberate practice? When are they supposed to retrospect and learn? I tell each and every one of my clients that probably the best tool they have for self-improvement is this thing over here. You don't have to have a fancy fountain pen. You can use a regular pen. But I want you to make time after meetings, at least 5 minutes after a meeting, to jot down your notes, what you're thinking. Yeah, you can also do it in the notes app on your computer if that's easier. But I always have my notes handy, and I fill in notes about every meeting, like, what was I surprised about? What do I want to share with others? What do I need to think more about? We have to have this retrospection. We have to have time to digest what we're going through so that we can keep learning. I don't just want to be there in the meeting. I want to have it's like squeezing a lemon. I'm going to squeeze it so hard, I'm going to get every drop of value out of that lemon. If I had to sit in a meeting, I'm going to think, how can I improve? How can the person I was in there improve? Who else needs to hear this? This is my mode of operation, and this is what I teach most of my clients to do. You have to constantly improve. You have to always be aware, and that is not possible if you're always having, back to back to back to back meetings, because you never have a second to digest what you just went through, and boom, all of a sudden it's the end of the day and you're going to start it all over again. Instead, make time for growth for your people. So tell them that you expect them to have this time. Tell them to have active learning, be it reading books, having, I don't know, listening to podcasts, having lunch clubs. So every 3 weeks or so, we have a book club over lunch where we talk about a book. We watch together a talk online and then talk about it. I don't know what. Do those. And one of the most effective tools I've seen and helped implement in companies for making managers grow is um, coaching circles, either with you as their managers or just a peer group where people sit together and share their issues. It's not always easy to kickstart these, and it takes some training. So if you want to do that and you want some help with that, feel free to talk to me about that. But the main point is I want to create this space for thinking about things. Think about engineers, when we want to do something, like we're kicking off a new project, we want to move between frameworks, we want to have a new architecture, use a new service, whatever it is, we usually have design reviews. We talk to our peers. We go and grab people from different teams who might have some experience, who are senior and want to get their inputs. Yet we don't do the same most of the time when it comes to management. I love creating these spaces for people to collaborate. So we have this space for people to say, I'm trying to coach my people, but I'm finding this hard. I'm finding it hard to talk to product in a way that they understand. I always have pushback when I try to get time to fix these things because we have tech debt. Whatever it is, when you have other people to talk to, especially peers, you can help one another. And it can also be a great point for you to notice when you have issues that are specific, as in that specific person might need some help, some coaching with their skills, and that's something that you can do one-on-one, or maybe the group can help one another. Yet if we're seeing something that's repeating in parts of the team or all of it, if all of your managers are lamenting the connection with product, then that might indicate that we have a bigger problem here. So coaching circles are an amazing platform for this growth if you set them up correctly and help your people use the time not just to moan and whine about things that are hard, but try to come up with areas where they can help one another, or decide that something needs to be escalated to you. Even if you're not part of these circles usually, if they notice that, for example, product is an issue among everyone, then yeah, it's time to give you a call. That sort of stuff. Make sense so far, I'm hoping? So manager development is something that you have to actively do. You need to make time for it personally. You need to ensure that your managers make time for it. You need to define the profession of management in your organization, and then we can start getting things into motion. So far, so good. Okay. Any questions? Awesome. Now, I always, when I try to do these things, I try to come up with ways to make things very accessible, make things easier for you to just get started. Because I know that virtually anyone who reads material about this, who consumes these videos, my podcasts, these are smart people. I'm tapping you on the back virtually. I really believe that you've got what it takes to do better in our profession. So I really believe that you can do essentially anything you want to, but getting started is often the hardest, toughest part. And what we try to do in most of my tools, and you can see it in my books, I try to break things down into simple algorithms, into a nice default way of starting something. Always, you're eventually going to have to tailor it to your specific size. Like when I purchased this jacket, initially I was very happy with it, and then I realized as I got better, I read these books for nerds about menswear, and I realized, oh yeah, I actually need to get this hemmed correctly, so the length, as you see, is amazing. I fixed that. Eventually you have to tailor things to what you ought to get. But initially, the simple, ready to wear, off the rack sort of solutions, I believe will really help you. All that to say that, hey, I've got one of these for you. So I said we want to define what's management in your organization. One of my favorite tools with people is skill wheels. I'm sorry for someone with my accent, it's not an easy thing to say. Skill, right? You have skills, skill wheel. And that is, you define a wheel with 5, 4, whatever. I usually go for around 8 different traits or skills that I want to see people do, people implement. We define the most important ones for the role, and then I use that as an aid to help the coaching that I'm doing with people. Now, the one I use the most, because most of my work is with executives, I have one for executives that I've gotten so many people to assess, and I usually have them redo it every quarter or so we can see progress. And I'm going to share the one I use with executives now, and then I'll tell you how I usually change it for managers. And you then have to adjust it a bit to your needs, but this is critical. So I'm just going to read the list of the skills I check for executives, because I'm deciding starting with this because you can also use it with yourself. We have the executive mindset. We have creating vision. Do you have vision for your company, for your role? This is like strategy for your organization. Instilling purpose. Can I make people be part of that vision? Can I make people realize what's important so they're not just, focusing on the tech part of the role, but what we want to achieve? Next, we have communication. When you talk, does the other party understand what you intended to? Then we have delegation. Are you someone who's a micromanager, or are you able to let others work so they can grow and you can do other things? Accountability. Can I trust that if you said, I've got this, then you're going to have it? Product mastery. Are you part of the business? Do you understand the business, the strategy, the customers, the market, etc.? And lastly, what do you know? Coaching. How good are you in coaching your people? So this is the skill wheel I usually use with executives. And you can do the exercise with yourself, rank yourself 1 to 10, and see where you need to focus on in the next quarter or so. But I'm going to add to that for managers, it's a bit different. We usually don't need to talk about vision and instilling purpose as, these grand scheme, because they're not executives. I look at this more into, do they know how to efficiently manage projects? Because that's usually a lot of the role. I look whether they have the ability to drive for value to ensure that they're aligned with the business needs. And the executive mindset is not an executive mindset per se, it's just a positive mindset. Are they able to ensure that we have the suspension of disbelief when we want to think about something? When they work with their peers in product, or do they have the default stance of being argumentative and always on guard, like trying to ensure that no one throws another ticket at them? Or are they trying to collaborate? Instead of immediately saying no, boom, shooting that away, are they sitting down and trying to think about, how do we make that happen? Even if it's hard, even if what they're asking doesn't make sense, can I find some mutation of that actually makes sense, is feasible, and provides business value? This is what I'm looking for when I talk to managers, when I create skill wheels by default for them. And of course, you might have a specific skill that you want to add or remove depending on your context. Create this skill wheel and then go through the process of ranking your people. Have them rank themselves, you rank them, then you see where are the diffs, where are the areas where they might be having a disconnect from reality, and then you can use that in order to start implementing coaching for them. Recap, I'm reminding you, if you haven't yet read the book or it's been a while, the impact coaching framework is all about having this chunked work with each person where we work in cycles of 2 to 4 months. I recommend 2 if possible. 3 should be the average, where we define a personal coaching goal for the person. And from there, you coach them during that period to improve in that, right? The skill wheels are amazing as tools to help you find what to do with each one, so you can very fast find the first 1, 2, 3 things, and all of a sudden we have the majority of the year laid out when it comes to the coaching goals for people. And this exercise that we just talked about, where you rank yourself 1 to 10 on this, and your boss ranks you, if you keep those notes, and everyone forgets about this like within a day, and you do that again at the end of the period, it's such a useful tool for everyone to see the progress that people make, which makes the improvement, even with soft skills, a lot more tangible. So I really like that. And I see how this can really help a lot of people, especially if they are first timers as managers, or if this is your first time managing managers. This is really, really helpful and can get you started just like that with something that's useful. This is not like the assessments that some of my bigger clients do, where you get, I don't know, a color, or, oh yeah, you're a 5 for blue squirrel or something. But we're finding things that are specific and actionable. I find skills where you have gaps right now, and we start working on that. Okay, that's the skill wheel. It's so easy. It's just a hack for you to get started with coaching if you're finding that intimidating. And lastly, another tool for you to make things a lot easier for managers to get started is to create a playbook. If you think about, again, I always draw these parallels between the things they started with, which is, IC engineering work and being managers, because it's easier for us to see what changes. When you work as an engineer, we have certain playbooks, things that we just know how they are done. In the company, or in general in the industry, we know how pull requests ought to work, how to update people, how to ask for comments, how to comment when we see issues with other people, how big usually a task is. We get the sense of what should be a default size for a good task, for example. Do I need to break this down or not? We get these over time. Your managers oftentimes don't have the equivalent for their management position. So if you try to define a playbook, it will make people's lives so much easier. For example, start with the skill wheels and help them see that they can create the same for their people, so they can very quickly assess, who needs my attention and how. How can I have the biggest ROI with the time I'm spending with the different people I've got? And also, again, to identify areas for themselves to improve in. You can explain to them in the playbook how to implement impact coaching as part of their role. When you become a leader of a team, you get the responsibility of coaching people. Here is how we coach people. Attach the ebook you got, that sort of stuff. This becomes your playbook. By the way, Duolingo just released their internal handbook, which I think is great as an example of giving that sort of company value, company defaults for a lot of things that lead their decision making. I recommend checking that out as well if you're into creating your own playbook. And then create together with the team, or you can do it alone, the defaults for routines and agendas. So what do I expect a team to have by default in the calendar? I expect a team lead to have regular one-on-ones. We have our process. So the process is, for example, Scrum. We have dailies, we have sprint planning, we have retrospectives, that sort of stuff. Just give them the default. They can tinker with it with time, but tell them how to start, because if I have something that I can just start going with, it anchors me. It gives me that sense of I'm doing things. I cannot be screwing things that badly if I'm following the defaults, right? And the less decisions they have to make about these things, the easier it's going to be for them. And actually, the easier it's going to be for you to manage the organization, because you have less variance in these things that generally don't need to be novel. Very rarely do I want a team to use its creativity for the way the organization works. I want the creativity to go into the product or into internal tooling and tech capital. But when it comes to how we operate, this should be, these are things that work well outside and we want to use them. We don't need to invent the wheel here. Reinvent the wheel, of course. Now, next, systematize all the things we just talked about in the calendar. It's amazing how having a repeat task in the calendar, a repeat meeting, makes things stick, especially if it's not just them having a one-on-one, time with myself, think about the team thing that it's so easy to just ignore, but something that also happens with other people to keep them accountable. So it can be, think about our teams, something that the entire engineering management team does once a month, or something that they do with you as part of your one-on-ones. Have that part of your playbook be systematized in invites, in calendar tasks, repeating whatever tools you use, because that's automatically anchoring people to do the right things then and there. Make regular growth time and explain to them that you expect it. So it's fine for them, growth time and budget. So make the budget for them to learn, to get books, to get courses. Tell them that you expect them to invest at least some of their time. I'm not okay with them saying, sorry, I'm gonna watch this course during the most hectic outage we've ever had. People need to be reasonable, but I do expect them to find the time to do that regularly. And lastly, review your playbooks every quarter, and you know how you're going to remember to do that. Yep, you're going to have a recurring reminder in your calendar to review these, have sort of a retrospective about how this is working, so we can help people be even better, have to make less minor decisions regularly, so our cognitive load is not overloaded and people can do the right things. All right, so I'm going to recap the three major things we covered. We want to invest in manager development, like creating the management coaching circles, defining what's a manager in your organization, and 2 tools to help really improve people as you're implementing impact coaching is to have skill wheels to help you decide how to coach your people, coach your managers, and to help them coach their ICs, and creating playbooks, which might sound grand. We're talking about 2 short Notion documents. This does not need to be, the Odyssey, but something that you can write really fast, is succinct, and allows people to just get going without having to reinvent the wheel constantly. Okay? Now, these things, I've implemented these in a bunch of companies. I've seen the positive impact that usually this makes within a month. It's not like, oh my God, I'm gonna start this and it's only gonna pay off within a year. People have written to me within 2 weeks of reading the impact coaching framework, we've already wins that they started getting. So you can do it too. They weren't special. None of us are really special. These are straightforward things that you just need the discipline to execute on. And if you're not sure how you're going to do that, if you're just going to now, wait for the second I close the recording and move on to the next thing you've got today and forget about this, you just wasted 40 something minutes. I'm not into that. So if you want to ensure that you're doing things correctly, in the email you get later with the recording of this call, you'll also get a link to the impact coaching. This is an offering I've got to help people coach them in implementing impact coaching in their companies. There are 3 different tiers that you can choose from depending on what you want to do. And again, because you signed up for this free session, you also will get a coupon to have 30% off. I think that's what I configured. If it was less than that, I'll have to fix that now. But I really think this can help you get things started so much faster and help ensure, I'm going right back to how we started, help you ensure that you create a team worth leading. That's it. Thank you as always for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. You can reply to my email with any questions about what we talked about. And if you have any feedback, I'm always open to that. And you'll be automatically added to my newsletter, which means when I'll announce session number 3 of the Coaching Upgrade series, you'll be the first to know. Have a great rest of your day. Ciao, ciao.